Alright, shalom YouTube. So in this video what I'm going to do is I'm actually rebutting a video that seems to be quite popular about me online, what have you, right? Because a lot of people don't understand. Now me, I wouldn't proclaim myself to be a sovereign citizen. I've always proclaimed myself to be a citizen of the United States. Now the interaction that the one video, and I'll tag it in this commentary and what have you, is failing to acknowledge that the citizens have rights, right? Unalienable rights. Now, if you go to the New York State government, New York State court system's own websites and what have you can download things such as the Magna Carta and what have you. And you can find a majority of it on my website, right? Because that's where they get all their direction. And the majority of the direction comes from the constitutions, right? Because anything that's unconstitutional, and I'm sure you're aware, that circumstance is automatically null and void, which means that each public servant, and that would include the police, have an oath of office to the Constitution, not only of the United States, but likewise to their respective states. So if you understand actually history and you understand the dynamics of our country, we don't live in a democracy. We live in a constitutional republic. So there are a lot of people that proclaim themselves to be sovereigns, and they go around without driver's licenses and everything else, and they get passports or they're state nationals and they denounce their citizenship and what have you. I'm not one of them, right? The interaction, this is like the third time I've ever had an interaction where I asserted my First Amendment right, not the Ninth Amendment, First Amendment, right? 10th Amendment, if you go to the United States Constitution as it currently sits, and you can find a copy of it as well as it disclosed prominently on my website, all the information as far as the respective laws and what have you that were broken by the police to come after me for a traffic infraction. Traffic infraction is not a crime, but they wanted to justify their position under the pretense of knowledge and what have you. And if you go to that video and what have you, I cited the 14th Amendment. It's an insurrection against the people, because the 10th Amendment states quite clearly that whatever's not on the federal level goes to the state or the people, not exclusively the state. And cities and townships and what have you don't have the right to violate the rights of the citizens. Corporations have no rights over the people. They are equally bound to the Constitution. That's in their charter, right? And violate those rights of the people, and if they consistently do it, DAs and so on and so forth can be disbarred. And if they work for a law firm, that law firm can be disbanded if they get a number of complaints. And likewise, there's various writs that can be instilled where if the city doesn't want to abide by their charter, which the charter is a requirement for them to abide by the Constitution, so if they're in violation of their own charter, that charter can be revoked, right? Understanding those dynamics. So I am not one that plays around when it comes to that First Amendment, me being a Messianic Jew, a citizen of the United States, somebody that was born here, raised here, and knows my rights. So I asserted those same rights when I obtained federal security clearance of high security public trust back when I worked at the United States Department of Veteran Affairs, right? I had to reiterate the Civil Rights Acts of 1964 and 1968 to the Justice Department that was interviewing me, because it requires an extensive 7-year background check, not just an employment check and what have you. They literally go to your door to door to your neighbors and what have you and interview them to see where your mentality is, see where if there's any risk at all with giving you that clearance, right? So now historically you want to also go back to Ruby Ridge, where likewise he was a former Green Beret asserting his rights, First Amendment rights, and likewise Second Amendment rights. Then he was selling off sawed-off shotguns or something like that, but that's still a Second Amendment right, especially with him being a former organized militia, right? That's what the militia is, the well-regulated militia. They're ignoring that in its entirety, right? So that's what they're failing to acknowledge, is that the people and their rights supersede any authority by the government, because the government, their primary purpose is to serve the people. And that's why we live in a constitutional republic, not a democracy. So all these different little notions and mind games that they play, trying to mitigate the rights of the people, are just that. All it is games, right? Now me, again, being a Messianic Jew and a former member of a Black Hebrew Israelite church, I understand the dynamics a lot more clearly than the majority. And that said, I assert those rights with impunity, because you should exercise your rights with impunity, which means that it is, in the case with Miller versus the United States, which you can likewise find on my website, a right cannot be converted into a crime. Now, a lot of modern Christians, if you watch my other videos and maybe I validate that modern Christians aren't Christians and Orthodox Jews aren't Jews. That's literal, undeniable facts. And likewise, I went to college for engineering. I can debunk evolution theory and the Big Bang theory on purely scientific principles. So when they're arguing police, they're enforcing policy, right? So when it comes to traffic violations and what have you, traffic infractions, it's not a crime. A crime requires, one, intent. Did I accidentally go through the stop sign? There was no intent. The other aspect being there has to be a victim. There is no victim, there is no crime. Now, what is a crime and why I called 911 was to report their criminal activity, because it is a crime to violate the rights of the citizens. That's Title 18, Section 242, deprivation of rights under the color of law. Now, with the false arrest on top of it, that's kidnapping. That's life imprisonment or the death penalty. I'm not playing around. Then you deal with Title 18, Section 241, which is conspiracy against rights. That's 7 years in prison for that one. So what they cited me with was Penal Code, not law, codes aren't laws, Penal Code 195.05, failure to identify, right? So that's what I was arrested for. And if you watch my video in its entirety, which is on my page, right, unedited and what have you, I intentionally left it unedited there for anybody to watch and what have you in its entirety or skim through, you can see that I provided my full name as well as my driver's license number. That meets the requirements to identify. So the failure to identify, well, you need to use a license. No, I had a license in my pocket. I didn't want to give it to him. That's Fourth Amendment. That's my right to keep my papers. I paid for my license. I have no obligation to give him my license. The other aspect is I was trying to assert my Christian name, right? Obadiah, servant of Yah. Why would that be important? The importance of that is because I was also asserting other rights. Rebuking devils. Speaking with authority. Right? To have respect to persons to commit sin. Freedom of exercise. Right? Because anybody that's disobedient to Yahweh and his commandments are children of Ha-Shatan, right? The devil. So why would I want the devil to have any authority over me? I am their teacher. They're not my teacher. The people are the ones that give them direction. And if any law violates the rights of the people when it's created, it's automatically null and void because it's violation of due process. That include traffic infractions, right? So my license is clean. You can probably, in that video, I left it unedited. So if you're a part of law enforcement or what have you want to pull the record off it, you'll see it's a clean license. And it's a valid license, right? So that said, what it is when there is no victim, no crime, and I've watched a lot of TikTok videos and what have you, is I was asserting my rights because I see a lot of things going on by the police where they're especially violating that First Amendment right with COVID restrictions and everything else. That was a violation of the First Amendment, right? Churches and what have you, modern churches, and you have a lot of attacks on Christianity. Again, Ruby Ridge, Messianic Jews, right? Just exercising their rights, and a few of them got killed in process, right? That's not legal. What they did was illegal, highly illegal, because that's why they have an oath of office to the Constitution, both of them, the United States Constitution, as well as the New York State Constitution, right? So that said, when everything occurred, right, they wanted to claim sovereignty. That's what it really is about. They want to proclaim their sovereignty. They want to assert authority that they don't have, right? They only get their authority through the constitutions, right? That's why they have an oath of office of the Constitution. They're the lowest level executive branch. They're the grunts. They're the bitches. They're the public servants, right? So that said, if they're in violation of that oath of office, that's a violation of Penal Code not law, Penal Code 195.00. I was one, they cited me with 195.05. They're in violation of 195.000. Official misconduct, grounds for impeachment, which even the governor of the state cannot prevent if that occurs. That's the first crime. That's likewise a Class A misdemeanor, right? Then that's a capital offense under Title 18, Section 242. That could give them life imprisonment or the death penalty, right? Now, to put it in a traffic infraction, why on the Christian level, it's blasphemy, right? Because it's not Yahweh's laws. If it's not Yahweh's laws, it's blasphemy. Now, I've been in a lot of situations where I've been driving around for a multitude of years, over 25 years. Never had an instance. Very cordial with the police, Again, I have police officers in my family, too. I don't hate anybody. But at the same time, with everything going down the way it is, especially in New York State, it's time to change a little bit of the dynamics, because there's public servants, they want to act like tyrants rather than public servants. And if they're acting like tyrants, I'll call them out on it, right? Especially when it came to vaccine mandates and mask mandates and everything that was transpiring in New York State prior to COVID, where Andrew Cuomo was trying to force the Amish to get vaccinated, otherwise he was going to close their schools or fine them, right? That's the Democrat narrative. Anybody that asserts their rights are suddenly sovereign citizens, right? The police have an oath of office, again, and if you go to the Executive Code of New York State under human rights, under 290, their primary purpose is to serve and protect the rights of the people, for the public health, safety, welfare, all the various things that they use for conjecture on to violate the rights of the people for traffic infractions where there is no victim. That applies to them, because their primary job is to protect their rights. So a traffic infraction where the victim is society, they're victimizing the public under the pretense that we have that authority. Civil Rights Code, Section 2 of New York State, states quite clearly, supreme sovereignty in the people. No authority under any pretense whatsoever can be exercised over the citizens without consent of the people. Clearly written, that's a civil right. And which basically means, again, the rights of the people supersede the state authority, right? So everything was reported to the Federal Division of Civil Rights on three dynamics. The first on the police, when I sent an email over to the court clerk, which told me to file a complaint with blah, 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 or get an attorney. And then she also told me to contact the city attorney, right? So I contacted the city attorney, sent them a plea offer, got no response. All right, filed a complaint with the Federal Division of Civil Rights that came back with hate crimes and interfering with religious activities, because that is a hate crime, right? That's the other aspect, because it's my belief, it's blasphemy. They're acting like they're deities. They're trying to use secular law, which is partial, and force it on the mentality of the church. The church is a people, not a place. So that's a violation of my rights. They're trying to control my mind. They don't have that right. That's still a First Amendment right? And what have you. So they utilized a lot of conjecture. So when I got to court and what have you, and I showed up, and I actually had a large objection to it, because you can't sin against the state, right? That's what it ultimately is they're trying to convict me of sins. That's what laws are. Yahweh's laws. If you break his laws, it's a sin, right? So they want to force me to sin and acknowledge their divinity is what it really boils down to. And I don't acknowledge their divinity because, again, they are not Yahweh. So I had the same issue with the same court previously, which you can find on my website too, where they wanted to assert some level of authority when it came to me being pulled over in a rental vehicle. Gave my license out and what have you. Again, a situation where I did a rolling stop or what have you on a stop sign, and he cited the rental vehicles not being properly inspected, despite the rental vehicle having an inspection sticker that was valid, at least according to its appearance and what have you, but his system was saying that it wasn't. He even himself told me that I wasn't responsible for it, and that it's the responsibility of the rental company, right? So I mailed in not guilty to it, and I contacted the rental company like the police officer said to have it dealt with, and I didn't hear anything. So I'm like, all right, well, whatever, it's gone away. Get a notice in the mail about 6 months later, well after the fact, So it should have been dismissed just based on the fact that too much time has expired and they shouldn't be coming after me for it. But at the same time, I had no idea what they're talking about. So I contacted court clerk about it. While the police officer said blah, 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 that it's not my responsibility. I did whatever I had to do. But your name's on the ticket. Okay. Here's the number for the city attorney. Left him a voicemail. He refused to acknowledge me back then, too. It's like, all right, whatever. Sent an email over to the court clerk. That way it's documented that I sent an email over. And she said, well, it's since the ticket's in your name and what have you, you have to come in, right? So I came in after being sent a few plea offers, what have you, which obviously I didn't acknowledge, because I'm not going to plead guilty to something that I have no responsibility over. It's not my responsibility to inspect a rental vehicle that I just recently rented when I had a valid inspection. How would that be my responsibility, right? So I cited the First Amendment, the second time I ever did that, right? Yeshua, being a black Jew, proclaimed salvation is of the Jews, per John 4:22, Romans 2, clarifying that a Jew isn't won by heredity, but by obedience to the Torah, which is the Ten Commandments, which neither modern Christians nor Orthodox Jews follow. And the only way they're going to have me acknowledge any level of guilt or what have you in accordance to their perceptions is if they can prove that they're Yahweh in the flesh, right? So that probably gave them perception that I'm a sovereign citizen, that I don't drive around in registered vehicles and what have you, but you can't even rent a vehicle without a driver's license. That's the other misconception that a lot of people were having, is that I have a driver's license. I have a valid driver's license. You can't rent a vehicle without a driver's license. So that said, it bled into everything else, right? So I asserted the First Amendment. I made a motion to dismiss based on the First Amendment immunity. Secondly, on the fact that it's a rental vehicle and it's not even my responsibility, because they do have maintenance done on the vehicle, but the rental company is the one that pays for that, and they don't have enough details at their disposal. So when I should have went there for a trial, because that's the only reason why I showed up, it was actually them offering me the plea offer again, then saying, well, we'll have a trial about it. So he ignored my first two motions to dismiss in person, only for me to show up, and then it got dismissed anyway because the police officer didn't show up, right? So you can say it was just a technicality, but that's more than that, right? So again, going back to the Civil Rights Code of New York State, and when it comes to identifying, a lot of the public defender, when I cited it to him and prior to the court case and what have you, I said that I did identify, right? And he said, I think you have to provide him with your license. Provide me with the law that says that I have to give him my license to identify, especially when case law dictates quite clearly that I don't. And then you go to the New York State Civil Rights Code again under Section 64, Part Subdivision A, Part 4, I believe it is, where it's dealing with the government identity. It says that any person under common law can change their name without having it, as long as they use it consistently and without intent to use it fraudulently, to commit fraud, right? So that applies to a Christian name, what have you, but that still applies under the First Amendment, and likewise under Article 1, Section 3, right? So the DA, not knowing the law and what have you, tried to have me remanded when I tried to assert my rights with her, because I showed up to court, got all the information, sent her an email asserting my immunity, right? Because you can exercise your rights with impunity. You shouldn't have any fear, because that's a conspiracy against rights. Title 18, Section 241, right? So they're violating my rights under the pretense of law, or color of law, in other words. That's 242. And then with the attempt to remand me, that was attempted kidnapping. That's life imprisonment or death penalty for her. Second complaint was filed on her. Again, Federal Division of Civil Rights came back with hate crimes and interfering with religious activity. I don't vote. I don't have any affiliation with their government, right? Because I rely on my rights, which are unalienable in the Constitution, right? That's the whole purpose. You can go to the case laws and whatever that substantiate that. Your rights can't be deprived from you without due process of law. That's the 13th Amendment, right? Right? So when people are utilizing sovereign citizen wave, you're putting people into a slant that they're not in. They're asserting their rights, and you think that the police have all authority. They're not the authority. The people are the authority. Police are the lowest level executive branch. Then you go all the way up to the chain to the governor. Then you go up the chain further, the President of the United States. Then you have the people. The people are all the way up here. We give the government direction. but none of the people up here have the right to tell any of the other people that my rights supersede your rights, right? So if the people arguing with each other about their rights and what have you, neither one can violate the other person's rights, then why would public servants be able to violate the rights? They can't create laws that violate the rights of the people and what have you, because that's, again, a democracy. We vote for, or rather you guys vote, because I don't vote at all, for people to represent you, but the representatives can't represent me at all. Same with the public defender and wave, because they're children of Hashatan, right? So again, asserting my rights, she tried to utilize everything I said to her about me asserting my rights to the name and what have you, declaring myself to be a prophet, which is Ephesians 4:11, to do the psych eval, which again, that's hate crimes, right? And what have you, the judge should have known better, because he has the oath of office of the Constitution. That's Article 6, Section 2, and all judges are bound to that Constitution. He said he was obligated to remand me, but he wasn't going to, right? His obligation is primarily to the Constitution. So when he said that, that's threats and coercion, trying to coerce me into compliance, right? Violation of the law. But I already knew what my rights were, so I didn't mind. I wanted the psych evals anyway. I asserted with the first one that I did validate my identity with the police, so that 730 psych eval unconstitutional, because it's a part of the criminal procedure. So I mitigated the Class A misdemeanor, the failure to identify, 195.05. That mitigates his ability to assess whether or not I'm competent, right? Just on that principle alone. Second psychiatrist I went to asserted the First Amendment aspect. I was trying to assert my Christian name. Again, a crime requires intent, even failure to identify. I have that right to assert my Christian name. Common law and what have you. That's Civil Rights Civil Rights Code Section 64A8 Subdivision 4, right? So even under common law, I have that right, regardless of the free exercise aspect of it, of religion. So she went through, well, who in the Bible changed their name? Where do you get that from? Well, Jacob became Israel, right? And then you have the common sense to where the Pope renames himself, and you have all these different sisters and nuns and whatever that rename themselves. Cassius Clay became Muhammad Ali. So it's like, this has been ongoing but this obviously wasn't clicking in her brain, right? And and when it comes to Title 18, Section 242, that also applies to public health care workers, which includes forensic psychiatrists, because they don't have the right to deprive me of my rights under any pretense. So when I went back to court on the 12th, and when I posted the videos, is because they deemed me incompetent, which is unconstitutional not only in the First Amendment, but also Article 1, Section 3 of the New York State Constitution, where it states quite clearly that it can't be deemed incompetent. So they're not abiding by their oath of office to either Constitution, right? So with the first psychiatrist, I asserted the fact that all citizens are a part of the militia, and we are obligated to militia duty. Go to American jurisprudence under unconstitutional acts. No citizen is obligated to abide by an unconstitutional act, nor is any judge or executive branch obligated to enforce that law, right? So if it's unconstitutional, nobody has any obligation to abide by it, and that would include gun laws and everything else, because it's the right to bear arms. Militia is on everybody. There's the organized militia, which is the military, and then there's the unorganized militia, which is pretty much the rest of the citizenship. So the right to bear arms can't be infringed, Second Amendment, but they do anyway, because, again, people are in compliance with ignorance. That's what it is, right? I'm a pacifist, so in that sense, especially if you go to the Civil Rights Code of New York State and wavy, it states quite clearly about religious exemptions to being obligated to arm ourselves, because believe it or not, citizens are obligated to arm ourselves to defend the state as well as the United States. But again, people think we live in a democracy, and their feelings supersede the rights of the people. So that said, this whole sovereign citizen dynamic, basically what you're trying to ignore is the fact that they want to violate the law, capital laws, right? That's the death penalty and what have you. Multitude of different felonies. I was fingerprinted and photographed and what have you. I was done that for when I worked as a contractor for the United States Department of Veteran Affairs and what have you. They did that for my security clearance, so no big deal, but that's still involuntary involuntary providing to information, right? That's the Fifth Amendment, right? provide them. They're not allowed to get that information from me, especially if I don't consent to it, right? Same with the psych evals. I didn't have to say anything, but I did anyway because I knew I had immunity, right? And they couldn't find anything that was going to come that they could use against me, incriminate me. That's the word I was looking for. Court order can't force me to incriminate myself. That's a violation of the Fifth Amendment. So again, go to my website and whatever. There's a multitude of rights that they violated. The first, the second, well, not the second, but a multitude of actual unalienable rights that they violated under the pretense that they had the authority, but they never had the authority. So maybe they didn't do a little bit more digging. I finally got a response to my third complaint that I filed with the Federal Division of Civil Rights, which was filed when I got the final order, which basically says the same thing, hate crimes and what have you, and contact the FBI and what have you, because they can't interfere and what have you. But nevertheless, I sent an email over to the court clerk as well as the the psychiatric center, because they wanted to have me remanded. They deemed me incompetent, saying quite clearly where my position was and citing all the laws, especially Penal Code 195.00, official misconduct grounds for impeachment, which not even the governor of the state can pardon, so that they can't prevent it, so they would lose all their benefits that they accumulated for misconduct, not to mention the criminal activity at Title 18, Section 242, as well as 241. So they could get life imprisonment or the death penalty, and that would go to the public health care workers. That would go to the judge, because it applies to the judge as well. It applies to the police officers. So they have no power to enforce that court order. And if they do, then I can file a writ of habeas corpus, get escalated to the Supreme Court, prove my case, and then they're going to be in a shitload of trouble. Now, again, it was semi-dismissed by the Federal Division of Civil Rights because they want me to contact the FBI and what have you, and they can't interfere with a criminal investigation if there's one pending or what have you. So I'm not sure if they did any investigating, or what have you, because again, I'm not familiar with that background. But again, it's a matter of doing good to those that harm and persecute us. So I'm under no obligation to abide by their commands, because they can't provide me with a lawful command, because they're my servants, right? I didn't commit a crime. I didn't hurt anybody, or all that was hurt was their feelings. I disrespected them, right? And to have respect to persons is to commit sin. So maybe they need to get a little bit more thorough education on the law, because the First Amendment still applies. Shalom.